Hi guys, sorry it's been a minute. My last week or so was really crazy. I'm not going to tell you the details because it really doesn't matter. But here we go with Chapter 4, The Count of Monte Cristo, The Betrothal Feast. The next day was gloriously fine. The sun rose red and resplendent, its fine first rays tinting the fleecy clouds with many delicate and brilliant hues. The festive board had been prepared in a large room at La Vazeuve, with whose arbor we are already acquainted. Although the meal was fixed for noon, the tavern had been filled with impatient guests since 11 o'clock. They consisted chiefly of some of the favored sailors of the Pharaon and several soldier friends of Dantes. In order to do honor to the happy couple, they had all donned their finest clothes. To crown all, Monsieur Morel had determined to favor the occasion with his presence, and on his arrival he was greeted with hearty cheers from the sailors of the Pharaon. Their owner's presence was to them a confirmation of the report that Dantes was to be their captain, and as he was popular with them all, they wished to show their owner, by this means, their appreciation of the fact that by a stroke of good luck, his choice coincided with their wishes on the subject. Danglars and Caudros were immediately dispatched to inform the bridegroom of the arrival of this important personage, whose entrance had caused such a sensation, and to bid him make haste. They had barely gone 100 yards when they perceived the small bridal party approaching. It was composed of the betrothal pair, 4 maids and attendants on the bride, and Dantes' father, who walked beside Mercédès. Fernand walked behind, wearing an evil smile. Neither Edmond nor Mercédès noticed this evil smile. They were so happy that they had eyes only for each other, and for the beautiful blue sky whence they hoped would come a blessing on their union. Having acquitted themselves of their errand, the 2 ambassadors shook hands amicably with Edmond, and while Danglars took his place beside Fernand, Caudros joined old Dantes, who was the object of general attention as he walked along, supporting himself on his curiously carved stick. He was attired in his best black suit, adorned with large steel buttons beautifully cut in facets. His thin but still vigorous legs were arrayed in a pair of beautifully embroidered stockings, which had obviously been smuggled from England. Long blue and white streamers flowed from his 3-cornered hat. Dantes himself was simply clad. As he belonged to the mercantile marine, his uniform was half military and half civilian, and with his good-looking face radiant with joy and happiness, a more perfect specimen of manly beauty could scarcely be imagined. As the bridal party came in sight of La Vazeuve, Monsieur Morel advanced to meet them, followed by the soldiers and sailors and other guests. Dantes at once withdrew his arm from that of his betrothed and placed Mercédès' arms respectfully in that of his patron. The shipowner and the blushing girl then led the way up the wooden steps to the room where the feast was prepared. For fully 5 minutes the boards creaked and groaned under the unwonted pressure of the many steps. No sooner were they seated than the dishes were handed round. Arles sausages, brown of meat and piquant of flavor, lobsters and prawns in brilliant red shells, sea urchins whose prickly exteriors resembled chestnuts just fallen from the trees, cockles esteemed by the epicure of the south was as surprising as the oyster of the north. In fact, every delicacy which the sea washes up onto the sandy beach and which the fishermen call sea fruit. "What a silent party," old Dantes remarked as he caught a whiff of the fragrant yellow wine that old Pamphile himself had just put before Mercédès. "Who would think there are 30 light-hearted and merry people assembled here?" "A husband is not always light-hearted," Caudros replied. "The fact is," said Dantes, "at the present moment I am too happy to be gay. If that is what you mean by your remark, neighbor Caudros, you are quite right. Joy has that particular effect that at times it oppresses us just as much as grief." Danglars looked at Fernand, whose impressionable nature was keenly alive to every emotion. "Well, I never," said he. "Are you anticipating trouble? It seems to me you have everything you can desire." "That is just what alarms me," said Dantes. "I cannot help thinking it is not a man's lot to attain happiness so easily. Good fortune is like the palaces of the enchanted isles, the gates of which are guarded by dragons. Happiness could only be attained by overcoming these dragons, and I do not know how I have deserved the honor of becoming Mercédès' husband." Husband, said Caderousse, laughing. Nay, captain, not yet. Act toward her as if you were husband, and you will see how she will like it. Mercedes blushed, but made no reply. Fernand grew very restless. He started at every sound, and from time to time wiped away the perspiration that gathered on his brow like large drops of rain, the precursors of a storm. Upon my word, neighbor Caderousse, it is hardly worthwhile taking notice of such a little slip on my part, Dantès said. 'Tis true that Mercedes is not yet my wife, but— Here he pulled out his watch. She will be in an hour and a half. Yes, my friends, thanks to the influence of Monsieur Morel, to whom, after my father, I owe all I possess. Every difficulty has been removed. We have got a special license, and at 2:30 the mayor of Marseille will be waiting for us at the Hotel de Ville. It is just struck 1:15. I think I am quite right in saying that in another hour and 30 minutes Mercedes will have changed her name to Madame Dantès. Fernand closed his eyes, for they gave him a burning pain. He leant across the table to save himself from falling. But in spite of his effort, he could not restrain a groan, which, however, was lost amid the noisy congratulations of the company. This feast, then, is not in honor of your betrothal, as we supposed, but it is your wedding breakfast? Not at all, said Dantès. I leave for Paris tomorrow morning. 4 days to go, 4 days to return, 1 day to execute my commission. I shall be back again on the 1st of March. We will have a real wedding breakfast the very next day. At this moment, Danglars noticed that Fernand, on whom he had kept an observant eye and who was seated at the window overlooking the street, suddenly opened his haggard eyes, rose with a convulsive movement, and staggered back on his seat. Almost at the same moment, a confused noise was heard on the stairs. The tread of heavy steps and the hubbub of many voices, together with the clanking of swords and military accoutrements, drowned the merry voices of the bridal party. The laughter died away. An ominous silence fell on all as the noise drew nearer, and when 3 peremptory knocks resounded on the door, they looked at each other with uneasy glances. "Open, in the name of the law!" cried a peremptory voice. There was no answer. The door opened, and a police commissary entered, followed by 4 armed soldiers and a corporal. "What is all this about?" the shipowner asked, advancing toward the commissary, whom he knew. "I fear there must be some mistake." "If there is a mistake, Monsieur Morel," the commissary replied, "you may rest assured that it will be promptly put right. In the meantime, I am the bearer of a warrant for arrest, and though I regret the task assigned me, it must nevertheless be carried out. Which of you gentlemen answers to the name of Edmond Dantès?" Every eye was turned on the young man as he stepped forward, obviously agitated, but with great dignity of bearing, and said, "I do, monsieur. What do you want of me? Edmond Dantès, I arrest you in the name of the law." "You arrest me?" said Dantès, changing color. "Why, I pray?" "I know not, monsieur. Your first examination will give you all information on that score." Resistance was useless, but old Dantès did not comprehend this. There are certain things the heart of a father or a mother will never understand. He threw himself at the officer's feet and begged and implored, but his tears and supplications were of no avail. "There is no call for alarm, monsieur," the commissary said at last, touched by the old man's despair. "Perhaps your son has but neglected to carry out some customs formality or health regulation, in which case he will probably be released as soon as he has given the desired information." In the meantime, Dantès, with a smile on his face, had shaken hands with all his friends, and had surrendered himself to the officer, saying, "Do not be alarmed. You may depend on it if there is some mistake, which will probably be cleared up even before I reach the prison. To be sure, I am ready to vouch for your innocence," Danglars said as he joined the group around the prisoner. Dantès descended the stairs, preceded by the police officer and surrounded by soldiers. A carriage stood at the door. He got in, followed by 2 soldiers and the commissary. The door was shut, and the carriage took the road back to Marseille. "Goodbye, Edmond. Oh, my Edmond, goodbye," Mercedes called out, leaning over the balcony. The prisoner heard these last words, sobbed from his sweetheart's breast, and putting his head out of the window, simply called out, "Au revoir, ma Mercedes." The carriage then disappeared round the corner of Fort St. Nicholas. "Await me here," Monsieur Morel said to the rest of the party. "I shall take the first carriage I can find to take me to Marseille, and shall bring you back news." "Yes, do go," they all cried out. "Go, and come back with all possible speed." The guests, who had been making merry but a short time before, now gave way to a feeling of terror. They feverishly discussed the arrest from every point of view. Danglars was loud in his assertion that it was merely a trifling case of suspected smuggling. The customs officials had been aboard the Pharaon during their absence, and something had aroused their suspicion. Monsieur the purser was sure of it, but Mercedes felt, rather than knew, that the arrest had some deeper significance. She suddenly gave way to a wild fit of sobbing. "Come, come, my child, do not give up hope," said old Dantès, hardly knowing what he was saying. "Hope," repeated Danglars. Fernand also tried to repeat this word of comfort, but it seemed to choke him. His lips moved, but no word came from them. A carriage, cried one of the guests who had stayed on the balcony on the lookout. "It is Monsieur Morrel. Cheer up, he is no doubt bringing us good news." Mercedes and the old father rushed out to the door to meet the shipowner. The latter entered, looking very grave. "My friends," he said with a gloomy shake of the head, "it is far more serious matter than we suspected." "Oh, Monsieur Morrel," Mercedes exclaimed, "I know he is innocent." "I also believe in his innocence," replied the shipowner, "but he is accused of being an agent of the Bonapartist faction." Those of my readers who are well acquainted with the period of my story must be aware of the gravity of such an announcement. Consternation and dismay were written on the faces of the assembled guests as the party silently and sadly broke up. Fernand, who had now become the horror-stricken girl's only protector, led her home while some of Edmond's friends took charge of the broken-hearted father, and it was soon rumored in the town that Dantès had been arrested as a Bonapartist agent. "Would you have believed it, Danglars?" Monsieur Morrel asked as he hastened to the town with his purser and Caderousse in the hopes of receiving direct news of Edmond through his acquaintance, Monsieur de Villefort, the deputy of the Procureur du Roi. I apologize for all the French butchering that happens. "Why, monsieur, you may perhaps remember I told you that Dantès anchored off the Isle of Elba without any apparent reason. I had my suspicions at the time. Did you mention these suspicions to anyone but myself?" "God forbid!" exclaimed Danglars, and then in a low whisper he added, "You know, monsieur, that on account of your uncle who served under the old government and does not attempt to hide his feelings, you are also suspected of sympathizing with Napoleon. So if I mentioned my suspicions, I should be afraid of injuring not only Edmond, but you also. There are certain things it is the duty of a subordinate to tell his master, but to conceal from everyone else." "Quite right, Danglars. You are a good fellow. I had not forgotten your interest in the event of poor Dantès becoming captain." "In what respect, monsieur?" "I asked Dantès to give me his opinion of you and to say whether he would have any objection to your retaining your post, for it seemed to me that I had noticed a certain coolness between the two of you of late." "What answer did he give you?" "He merely referred to some personal grievance he had against you, but said that any person who enjoyed his master's confidence was also sure of his." "Hypocrite," Danglars muttered. "Poor Dantès," said Caderousse. "He's the right sort, and that's a fact." "Quite agreed," said Monsieur Morrel, "but in the meantime the Pharaon is captainless." "We cannot put to sea for another 3 months," Danglars added, "and it is to be hoped that Dantès will be released before then." "No doubt. But in the meantime, I am at your service. You know that I am as capable of managing a ship as the most experienced captain. Then when Dantès comes out of prison, he can just take his post and I will resume mine." "Thanks, Danglars. That would be a way out of the difficulty. I therefore authorize you to assume command of the Pharaon and superintend the loading of the cargo. No matter what misfortune befalls any one of us, we cannot let business suffer." So saying, he proceeded in the direction of the law courts. "So far, everything is succeeding wonderfully," Danglars said to himself. "I am already temporary captain, and if that fool of a Caderousse can be persuaded to hold his tongue, I shall soon have the job for good and all." And that is the end of chapter 4. See you next time.